it's not an easy job, you know, and you got to survive.
What's kind of interesting is that Bob and I probably have the most in common of any of the Ren and Stimpy people, because we both came from Marvel Comics and both could paint and both could cartoon, although he could always cartoon better. And it just seemed like yesterday when I was seeing Bob in New York once in a while in Larry Hama's office, and then I'd come back out for summer vacation to see John Kay, who I used to work with a lot more when I lived in California, and there's Bob. It's like, what are you doing here?
Yeah, I remember.
And I didn't even know. I was like, well, he's kind of a comic book inker. What? And then I go, well, I'm a comic book inker. You know,
Yeah.
So it's like, who am I to say? And then I saw his drawings and his paintings, and I was like, oh, I totally got why John hired him.
Yeah.
So, sort of a story about
So tell us a bit about what you did before Ren and Stimpy came to you.
Well, I have, you know, we both have extensive resumes that we could go on for like 20 minutes running down our biography, but in the briefest of strokes, I wanted to be, always wanted to do animation, always wanted to do comics, always wanted to be a painter. So over the years, I've managed to do all of them. And at first, I was trained in the animation business because school was so shit. They didn't treat you tradition anymore. So I gave up being a painter and just started working for cartoonists in the animation business where I get paid to learn. And did that for a long time. Tried to be, John Kay and I, he denies this now because you may have heard there's been a little bad blood, but we were actually partners and we did some early formative cartoons together and tried to sell shows like Ren and Stimpy for a long time. And I gave up and just said, I'm going to be a painter, and moved to New York and studied that and did comic books. And then one day, I think one summer I came back and did some little projects stuff with him and Bob, and for a game or something. And then
The Ugly Druggies game.
Yeah, and then they sold Ren and Stimpy. And part of me wishes that I'd stayed partners with him all those years, because he'd have had to work me into the contract.
So Bob, you're co-founder of Spumco, and Bill, you...
I made up the word Spumco.
Yeah.
It was almost Loadco. And if you get the joke, you're entitled to it. And that's
And
Not to the California location.
Yeah, right.
And Bill, you've known the players longer than anyone. You know, tell us a bit about the origins of the studio and Ren and Stimpy.
Okay, well, I was working for Rankin Bass in New York, working on Thundercats, Silverhawks, Tiger Sharks, Mini Monsters, Street Frogs, and who knows what else.
Paradise.
And while I was still working at Marvel, doing Marvel Comics. And I thought, wow, animation's kind of cool, and they actually pay you money you can live on. So
And they have a union.
So I jumped in my 66 T-Bird with Vincent Waller, and we headed out to California, and I got a job at Deke, a big animation studio that was doing about 10,000 cartoons a week. They were just churning them out.
Really
And I
high
got a
quality
job.
too.
Yeah, real.
Very memorable cartoons. Most.
Very memorable. Captain Planet. And so, and Inspector Gadget, to their credit, you know.
And then there was Gadget Planet.
Gadget Planet. Yeah, what happened to that? And I got a job working on Alf Tales, and within 2 days I quit. And I went over to work on The Real Ghostbusters for Will Mineo and for Michael Gross, the original producer of the movies. And that was great, because I'm sitting next to Bruce Timm before he was Bruce Timm. And I'm watching this guy draw, and it was like watching a sewing machine.
He didn't have a beard yet.
He didn't, but yeah, he was a beardless youth. He was all shiny in those days, and kind of pink, kind of the color of silly putty. But and
He has more hair now, but he's the same color.
yeah. But he would draw. It was like his pen was so quick, and he chain smoking, smoking thousands of cigarettes all at once, and
Still is a good example for his children.
But I picked up on something that Bruce Timm was a sponge, and I'm a sponge. I can walk in and look at your drawings and go, oh, okay, I see how he does it, and I can pick it up, I can steal it. That's why no one ever wanted to work with Robin Williams, because he'd steal all their jokes. So, and I started picking up on his stuff, and this thing happened. We started like riffing drawings back and forth, and it was like going to art school. It was pretty cool. Meanwhile, down the hall, and I've become friends with Jim Gomez, who is the unsung hero of Ren and Stimpy, one of the actual creators of the characters in the series, but only got kicked in the teeth for it. But anyway, he said, hey, why don't you come work on The New Adventures of Edie Cecil with John Kay? So I went down there, I worked on that. Within a few weeks, we were all fired. But it was the Mighty Mouse crew. It was the Ralph Bakshi Mighty Mouse crew. So that's why we all got fired. And
other reasons.
Another reason. So then after that, I'm sorry, there's too much stuff. After that, I went and worked on Tiny Toons, and that's kind of a lot of great people came in there. The most amazing crew of people worked on Tiny Toons, and now they're all big shots in the business. John was at home having beer on ice, and couldn't get any work. So
Heineken, always Heineken.
Heineken, right, Heineken. And so we decided to start a studio. So we rented a room from Carl Masek and Jerry Beck, who were doing Streamline Pictures at the time, and they were trying to get people interested in a Japanese animator named Miyazaki. And they were trying to distribute his films in those days. And we didn't have any furniture. We sat on the floor drawing on our laps, and we did this stupid anti-drug game, with some guys trying to cash in on the new no-drug craze. And
How'd that work out for them?
We did this ridiculous game that you can buy online on eBay for about $3.
Great little drawings in it, though.
Great drawings in it, and Bill did the cover. So, meanwhile, Carl, who was running Streamline, helped John get a meeting with Nickelodeon. They pitched Your Gang, which was an Our Gang comedy parody, and Ren and Stimpy were minor characters in it, and they said, we like the dog and the cat, make a cartoon out of that. And so we made a pilot, they ran it on the Spike and Mike Film Festival, and next thing you know, we're making a cartoon.
To jump a little earlier, years before that, John and I were very close friends, and I was friends with his girlfriend Lynn when I worked at Filmation. And I met Lynn one day in the front of Filmation, and I'm like, oh, who's this beautiful girl who can draw, And it was like I was totally infatuated. And and we started talking about cartoons, and she's like, you need to meet my boyfriend. And I'm like, I don't want to meet your boyfriend. And but anyway, she dragged me kicking and screaming, kind of. And turns out we were kindred souls. We were both really weird and felt completely alienated from the business. And he was so weird that he couldn't get any work, because his drawings were so weirdly extreme. They were the primitive early versions of the Ren and Stimpy style. And but he eventually he had that entrepreneurial spirit where he wanted to run a crew. So he started getting a few artists together and doing layouts freelance for Hanna-Barbera or whoever would do it. And during that time, we would spend some time and usually just get really, really, really drunk and tell jokes. And we would also hang around with these two kids that are friends of his from Canada. One, Bob mentioned, was Jim Gomez. The other one was a guy named Felix Forte. And they all kind of came up with Ren and Stimpy. I was kind of there, but more like they really had come up with the first drawings and the first, like, this is sort of a Tom and Jerry kind of a setup thing, but weirder. And I probably threw in a few jokes and stuff, but really they were the three. And Felix at one point had a mental breakdown and went back to Canada and became a carpet salesman or something, and never was part of the Spumco studio. And Jim did work at Spumco as a writer. We tried to sell Ren and Stimpy or some variation on the show that Bob described for years, and we couldn't get anywhere. And that's why I quit and went to New York and studied paint. I said, John, we're never going to sell this thing. Little did I know that Nickelodeon would be formed out of nothing, and not know that they needed to control cartoons. They just liked cartoons, and they actually, you know, over the years, John said some disparaging things about them, and they were, with my limited contact with them, they were wonderful people. And most of they gave us this giant chance. They had all this faith in him. You know, I don't know why he turned that whole story around to, you know, anyway, I shouldn't get too political about all that,
But Nickelodeon,
that's some of the
they were
early
great.
memories I have about it.
They were really great to work with, and you can't discuss the show without mentioning Vanessa Coffey, who was the visionary behind Nicktoons, and
She greenlighted all those early shows, including when
and she convinced Nickelodeon that it was important to give creators the chance to direct their own shows and let them make cartoons that were their vision and their dream.
And she did that.
She did that.
That was back when it wasn't an executive board where 25 people spread the responsibility. It was her convincing the money management at Nickelodeon.
Yeah.
Her.
Back to